Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Vickery podcast. I have a fantastic guest today. I think you're all going to find him extremely interesting. This is Marco. Marco is a formal aeronautical engineer, super smart individual, but now he is much more focused on mentoring, specifically guys, helping them with their dating life, but also how they can really market themselves and make themselves much more attractive in that sense. So, Marco, welcome to the show.
I love the introduction. Thanks for having me, man.
No problem. I was thinking how long am I going to go for that introduction, but I think aeronautical engineer sort of it speaks for itself, I think.
Thanks. Yeah.
So the first thing I wanted to go into was really to delve into the mindset you need to be an aeronautical engineer because it's so different to the mindset you need in order to be attractive to the opposite sex or sort of be a charismatic person. So do you mind taking us through that journey of how you got into engineering?
100%, man. I think that's very spot on. I think that for me personally, I've always been like fascinated by technical subjects, and I've always been a very analytical guy, so to speak, big math nerd, stuff like that. So I really like found myself really well in this field, so to speak, and that's how I ended up starting having my first bachelor actually in mechanical engineering. I ended up having my master's in aeronautical. So yeah, like one of the things that I noticed is that it really requires a lot of analytical skills, so to speak, and which is great. It's great when it comes to it really makes you a good engineer, so to speak. The problem is it also typically, let's say, it has a downside sometimes, which is leads to a lot of overthinking sometimes. And generally speaking, the type of communication that, for example, is rewarded when it comes to dating is not exactly the same type of communication that is rewarded when it comes to engineering, so to speak. So these two different type of communications are very, very different one from the other ones, and this makes it really, really hard, for some guys, including myself in the past, to have success when it comes to dating.
I see. I mean, what was the reason that you got into the engineering side of things? It was just being good at it, or was it also, you wanted a career inside of it, or your family really encouraged it? What was the reason?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of things. That's a really good point. On one hand, I would say this is something that it kind of made sense at the time because I've always been like really drawn to the, say, scientific disciplines, so to speak. I've always been like interested in technology, so it kind of made sense for me at the time to get into this certain kind of discipline. But I also had examples in my family. My uncle, for example, is an engineer, so for sure, thinking backwards, let's say, having some role models probably also drove me to end up in that field, let's say.
It's funny though, because I mean, I've been looking at researching you and your Instagram. You don't come across as a nerd. I'm assuming that that's not something that was naturally given to you. You had to learn that.
Yeah, I do believe that, I've definitely worked on myself a lot in different, let's say, in different subfields, so to speak, to really like become a better communicator, so to speak, and also specifically, better obviously in dating. So that definitely was not, let's say, natural, I would say. I had worked a lot on myself. I did pretty much everything you can think of, including, like having like joining drama classes, having improvisation comedy classes. So yeah, really going a little bit outside of the engineering space, so to speak.
And the reason I say that is because, I mean, I'm obviously on the more fashion content creation side of things, but a lot of guys reach out to me and they say, Connor, how do you get into that world? How do you get into the world of speaking to very high status individuals or getting into venues that people normally can't get into? And honestly, I look to people like yourself, and the first thing you need to do is really work on yourself. You need to work on your presentation, you need to work on your communication. But a lot of people that say to themselves, okay, I'm going to learn that, there's a moment, there's a breaking point when something happens and they go, okay, I need to fix this. For you, what was that moment when you went, okay, I need to do something about this?
Man, I'm gonna tell you this anecdote. There was this time when I was invited to this birthday party of this friend of mine. She was a woman, she was a friend, she is a woman, she's a friend. And she invited me to her birthday party, and at the time, I'm really talking about obviously years ago, I didn't know anyone there. And I only knew her. And obviously she was a birthday girl, right? So she could not like devote her full undivided attention to me. Clearly, she had guests and other people that she wanted to speak to. So it was classical party mode, let's say. And I arrived to this party, and I remember that I kind of talked to her, maybe one more person, maybe a couple of more people, and that's it. And I kind of like spent the remaining part of my evening like quite alone, say, and feeling like really bad for the remaining part of the evening, really miserable. And then I remember that I arrived home after this evening that I had the feeling it just, it lasted forever. And I remember sitting on my bedroom and thinking, I am such a loser. And yeah, I think this, as you said, there's always a trigger point, right? And for me, this was like, this is crazy. This is crazy that I'm in a social environment where people are having fun, where I'm supposed, to meet people, to socialize, and I'm not able to do that. I don't have the skills to do that. And so I think this was definitely one of the realizations that I had when I started putting myself out there more. And then, it kept going. I wouldn't say it was black and white. I wouldn't say that moment, my life changed entirely with one snap of fingers, but that was definitely, one of the first moments where I can think, something happened there, let's say.
So it wasn't so much because some guys say to me, they had a romantic relationship that went horrifically wrong. Yours was more overall, you struggled to be social in a situation which needed it.
It's a good point. I think it was both. It started with the social journey for sure. So that was definitely the initiator. Later on, I was able to go, to overcome, to become more social in general, but I still that had the issues that are specifically related to the dating world. So, for example, I didn't know, how to make a conversation more romantic and less platonic. So I was, the classical guy that used to end up in the friend zone, let's say, at the end of, I was always being told like, I'm sorry, I just see you more as a friend. I didn't really feel that spark. I didn't really feel that
Brutal.
connection.
Brutal.
Yeah, yeah. Especially when you receive it over and over again, it can really put you in a wrong spot, because you tend to assume that there's something wrong about you, let's say, as an individual, let's say, as a human being. And so this is definitely something that at some point I realized like I need to do something about that. So yeah, it's both. Let's say it's both the social part, let's say, and later on, even when the social part was overcome, let's say, there was still this component of specifically what do I do in a romantic context, let's say.
Okay, so let's say someone's watching this and they've had that moment. They've been to the party, they sit on their bedroom, on the bed, and they have that moment of going, I'm such a loser. Let's go back to what did you do? What was that first step you did in order to becoming a bit more social?
Yeah. I'm gonna start a little bit meta here. I'm gonna say that the first thing is really realizing that David Goggins has this quote, nobody's coming to save you. And I think this is so accurate. This is something like we have always been, at least I grew up in an environment that was always told like, if you behave well, like if you are a good man, then, if you you have a stable career, then the right woman will come, and I think this is one of the biggest lie that we are sold, so to speak, because if something is valuable, chances are you have to work for it. And so this applies to pretty much everything. It applies to your career. It applies to your fitness. If you care about being a fit guy, your health, and it definitely applies to your relationships as well. So the first thing that I would say to come back to your question is really realizing that it's up to you and you only. And so and this is good because it means that it's something that you can change. It's something that you have control over. And so this is the first step. The second step is doing something that starts getting you in that direction. So if we are talking about, if you are someone that, for example, has a hard time just being social in general, I would say just put yourself out there a little bit more. Start there, and it can be as simple as, making a couple of more words with a cashier at the supermarket, or simply, hang out in some groups or activities where you can find people and where can you meet people, because this will definitely start training two things. Number one, the way you view the world and the way you perceive yourself and the other people, and also the tactics in terms of communication skills. So you will become sharper and sharper in the way you communicate. So that is definitely one point. And then there's the third stage, like for example, a lot of guys that come to me, typically these are guys that have their life pretty much all figured out. They are usually quite social, I would say. They have their career that is going really, really well. They have their finances on point, their health on point, but they simply struggle with one single piece of the puzzle, which is they haven't really figured out their relationships and their dating lives. And so in that case, obviously you want to zoom on that one, and you want to get a little bit more specific on your communication skills when it comes to dating and the way you market yourself, as you were saying before.
It's really funny. That talk track is really similar to my journey. So just to give you a bit of context on me, I had a New Year's resolution in the early 20s that I was never going to go to a bar in London called Simmons again. And Simmons is a kind of dive bar in London. And I said in my head, I was like, I'm hanging out in these venues which are horrible pubs and sort of clubs in London. And I said to myself, I'm never going back to Simmons again. I have to get into better venues. I have to have a higher quality of social life. And just that thought, it was a change where I said I have to set higher standards and then make small steps towards making that happen, which I've managed to do at this point. So I think your advice is very valuable when it comes to just being more social. But I noticed on a lot of what you say on Instagram, a lot of your advice is based on just making sure that throughout your everyday activities, you're going that little bit extra step further to make conversations happen. Like one of your posts is how to make a conversation in a coffee shop. Do you want to go over, how you go, really what are the tactics when you go throughout your everyday life about how to get that extra step and reach out to people?
Yeah, 100%. Here you're talking specifically about the dating context, let's say, right? Got it. Cool. Yeah, different things. So in terms of tactics, so many things. From the offline perspective, definitely one of the things that I would say is initiating more interactions is always the starting point. And the way you can do that in different ways. You can be more direct about that. So whenever you see someone that you are interested in or you're interested in getting to know, you can literally simply start a conversation. And the absolute easiest way to do that is by giving a compliment. So I'm a big fan of giving compliments specifically in certain circumstances, and it can be as simple and as straightforward. Hey, I really like your style. Or hey, I just felt you had a good energy and I just wanted to say hi. And people overthink this. Like it can literally be simple. The opener, so to speak, so the conversation starter literally just has the function of getting you the foot in the door. And then it's way more important the way you follow that up and the things that you say after that. So this is crucial. You were mentioning my cafe post. This was me giving an example of an interaction that I personally had in a cafe where, I was just minding my own business, busy with my laptop, like running a business and stuff. And there's this cute girl that sits next to me, and I just want to start a conversation. And so at that point, I was about to go to the toilet, and I literally just literally told her like, hey, can you watch my stuff for a second? And this was literally, the conversation started. Nothing brilliant, no James Bond lines here. Like, really just, look, I gotta go to the toilet, watch my stuff for a second, And then I literally went to the bathroom, then I came back, and then I was like, oh, thank you very much. By the way, what do you do? Because she was also like, I think she was with her phone. And she was like, oh, I'm checking like this post, blah, blah. And then from there, we started a conversation. And then after that, I just suggest, what, we should totally grab a coffee one of these days. And she was like, yeah, cool. We can definitely do that. And that's, how I got a date literally out of that circumstance. Funny enough, people are not used to it anymore, And this is the cool part. Like, as long as you do that, you will get a really positive reaction. I remember this girl, when we went on a date together, she literally told me, I felt this was like so old school. Like I was so excited because like people don't do these things. And I was like, Yeah, I guess. I don't know. So it was a positive reaction. So this is one of the things that I would say, like literally start more conversation, as simple as it sounds. You don't need, the best openers. Literally, it's as long as you start a conversation, you engage a little bit. Ideally, you flirt as well. I could go, deep on that, but I don't want to get too technical too soon, let's say. And then you just ask for the number, like you suggest meeting up. That's a great starting point. Another thing that I would say that people, I know that this is probably, there are mixed opinions on that, but dating apps are also huge, especially if you are someone that is busy and we all have shit to do. Clearly, you also have your stuff, your things, the content and everything. And so dating apps really, as long as you know how to present yourselves online, they can be huge, because the big effort is in setting up the profile at the beginning and really understanding how you can do that part. Once that part is in place and you have a profile that is up and running with little maintenance, and this is the engineer in me talking, you can literally keep this system running, and you can get literally dates every single week. So if you combine these two strategies, then you get really the best of both worlds.
I mean, I would push back on that in that it's very easy for you to say that, but I have friends who really struggle with the dating apps. It's not just the fact that sometimes they're meeting people that they're not interested in. Their profiles, they don't know what to do in order to make it a cool profile. So, I mean, I'm in a relationship right now. I'm not on the apps, but when I was, it can be a real slog. So, what are the tactics? I mean, from an engineer's point of view, how can you set up a system so that it's seamless?
That's a great question. So, a couple of points that I want to make. First of all, you're right. Dating apps can be brutal, and I feel like a lot of people tend to hate them also because they can have an impact on their perceived self-esteem and self-worth. And I always say that online dating is not about people, it's about profiles. And this distinction has to be 100% clear in your mind. So whenever you receive a type of feedback like no one is liking my profile, you don't have to go down the spiral of thinking, I suck, but rather thinking my online dating profile sucks. And that's better because this is something that you can fix. And I've really, at this point, I've coached quite some people on that. And as long as you put together like a good profile that can, I've read, like you can put it off. You can put it off. Even you don't need to be a 10 out of 10, in terms of, looks. You don't have to have this like chiseled jawline or stuff like that. So this is one point. In terms of really getting, let's say, down to the tactics, there are many things that you can do, and I'm gonna start with the don'ts. So don't approach online dating as 99% of the guys do, thinking that the latest pictures that you shot with your friends on Saturday night are gonna save your life. So, go through your camera roll and picking like a couple of selfies and a couple of, some picture where one part of your face was literally cut and left out. It's just not gonna fly, like especially nowadays the competition is huge. So you need to stand out. And this is the key message. How do you stand out? You can do different things. First off, quality matters. So you don't necessarily need to have all the pictures that are professionally taken. I'm actually a fan of alternating some pictures that are more like professionally taken with some other pictures maybe shot with an iPhone. But at the very least, you should be able to guarantee a minimum threshold of resolution of the picture, let's say. Lighting needs to be on point. We don't need to have the feeling that you shot these pictures in your basement. This is the kind of the idea. Number one. Number two is conveying your personality. So expressions matter a lot when it comes to online dating. People tend to overestimate it. Sure, if you have cool stuff to show, like cool activities, you climbing Mount Everest, amazing. Who wouldn't like that? But the most important thing that a lot of people underestimate is, for example, the way they come across in terms of vibe and energy. And a lot of people, they are just not used to be behind the camera. And so when they shoot pictures, when they have pictures taken of themselves, they just look uncomfortable. And the people can see that, especially women. They have a sixth sense for this kind of stuff. They can just feel if someone is uncomfortable behind the camera. You can feel if your smile is the smile that you do when you are at your grandma's birthday and she tells you to smile after the 88th picture. So You want to come across as someone who's a cool guy, basically, who's like genuine, who's like, fun to be around. And so there are some expressions that I go through in detail, but the idea here is you want to have pictures where at the very least you're not uncomfortable. Bonus points if you also manage to show that you are confident. That is great. This is definitely one point. And then when it comes to, conveying yourself, your interests and the things you do matter as well. So I mentioned before, the quality point, like having pictures that are like good quality. Now, a lot of people take this literally and they're like, okay, cool. So apparently Marcus says the quality is the only thing I need on my online dating profile. And they just go to the first photographer they find. They take like 6 studio photos and then, they try them out and they get no matches. So quality is definitely important, but you also want, number one, your profile to look authentic and in the moment. So to have this like stolen shots kind of vibe, so to speak. And you also want to portray yourself. The first thing I said is crucial because, ideally, I always say the way you want to think about online dating is the following. You want to think about giving the girl an experience of your life. Kind of, she should go through your profile and, she should feel she's inside a documentary of your life. She should feel that, you're just living your life and you have like a photographer with a perfect DSLR camera popping up from the sky from time to time taking pictures of you. This is the idea. And the thing is, if your pictures are staged or they look staged, if you're like, you have these like, poses when you're indicating things, doing this, or if they just feel unnatural and staged, like you're not gonna pull it off. So this is crucial. And your interest, as I mentioned. So you need to do some things, some fun stuff, or simply have some interest that at the very least give her an idea of who you are as a person, what are the things that you like, what are the things that you do. And no, watching Netflix is not an option. So obviously, doing something a little bit more on the active side. It doesn't need to be anything crazy. You don't need to be the extroverted guy who's like, necessary out and about all the time, but you do need to have some interests, some things that you are passionate about and some things that you are pursuing. And once you do them, you display them on your online dating profile in an attractive way.
I like that line you're saying that it's as if the girl is in the documentary of your life. I like that. I've not heard that before. But the problem is, and this actually ties back really well to the content I create, because I'm not doing the dating side of things. I'm doing more fashion content where I'm trying to connect with the power figures in the fashion industry, and therefore my content needs to look really professional. Something that if a designer looked at it and they went, okay, that's great, I want to work with him. Really similar to if someone's looking at a dating profile. But the problem is there are some people out there whose lives are not that cool. What would you say to them? If someone's life is pretty boring, well, they haven't really got much interest apart from playing Xbox and PlayStation. I mean, what do you say to those guys?
Yeah, that's a great point. Couple of things. It depends on what they want. And I'm saying this because of two different examples that I have in my mind. If you are looking for someone that is exactly like you, so you're looking for someone that is also like just into computer games or stuff like that, you are going to niche down a lot. And I've seen this happening, I've had people, for example, like some clients of mine that were super niched, literally I have a client in mind from the top of my head, literally all his interests kind of like rotated around the technology and video games. That was it. Super, let's say, niche down. And in that case, you can find someone that kind of matches that description, but for sure, you are reducing your options by a ton. So by an order of magnitude, we're talking about. So you can go that way. In my experience, it can be quite limiting. The other way that you can go for is you can say, well, let me see which other interests or which other activities I can pursue. And I think this is very crucial because I would say these people probably have other interests or other things that they would like to explore. We are always, I would say most of the people, they like to work on something that they are passionate about. And so it's just about overcoming the initial barrier of putting yourself out there in a field where maybe you're not the expert and when you have to start again from scratch. But this is definitely feasible. And if you want to expand your options when it comes to dating, this is something that I would recommend you doing that. Again, you don't need to pursue 1,000 different things at the same time. I am very, let's say, careful with the way I allocate my time. But having at least, a couple of activities, for example, if you are like someone who's a software developer and who's like into technology, maybe you want to have something also where you're cultivating your health and your fitness on the side. Maybe you want to have, you want to read a little bit or have, take a couple of improvisation comedy classes. Nothing too crazy, but this can already like expand two things. Number one, your options, because you're going to make yourself more interesting and more attractive to the dating market, and also your skill set, which in turn will, let's say, have an impact as well on the way you communicate and on the way you behave on dates, for example. So, yeah.
I think that's a good point, and I think sometimes people underestimate what can happen if you just pick up, a hobby in your life. I mean, that's exactly what I did. I picked up photography. I picked up then organizing fashion events. I then picked up, okay, why don't I now try and put some social media out to try and market myself? And it's completely changed my life. And I've noticed that either you're on that similar journey where you have your skill set, but you're really leveraging, I mean, especially Instagram, but I know you have a school sort of community as well where guys can come in and learn from you. Where did you get the idea to put yourself, because it's one thing where you teach guys this content, but then you start to market yourself and really push yourself out there. Where did that come from?
Well, I'm gonna give a very boring answer, which is I had to do that in that case, because obviously if I want to reach people and I want to help people, and I really want to build something meaningful and impactful around that, like putting out their content and making myself known is a big part of it. And so it kind of came from a place of need in that case. And then I got passionate about that later. This is also something that I want to bring to the attention, because a lot of people maybe think, well, I don't like following up your questions, like which thing do I pick on? Like which interest should I pursue? Like you don't need to start with something that it's like the dream of your life. You need to start with something that you are curious about. And then once you start pursuing that, then this is the moment where you start like grasping the insight, and then you start becoming passionate about the nitty-gritty details of it. And then once you are into the nitty-gritty details of it, this is really when the game starts becoming interesting, and you start also discovering other things and branching out the same way you did as well. So that's also one point.
I think all good stuff, but I would say I've noticed that, I mean, I've got one side of my audience which are designers, models, sort of fashion influencers, but then I have a lot of guys that reach out to me who would probably watch your content and say, like, Connor, how are you able to get into catwalks and private parties with the sort of fashionistas and models of London? And I'd say that the problem is a lot of guys are stuck here. They're stuck in their head. They're stuck overthinking things. And I mean, I know you come from that engineering background, but you don't come across like that. You come across very outgoing. So what would you say to those?
Like some years ago.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. What do you say to those guys that are consuming they're constantly consuming content. There's so much sort of, I'd class it, manosphere content out there, but they're not actually doing anything. What do you say to those guys?
Yeah, that's a great point. How to stop the overthinking and how to actually start taking action. That's $1 million question. Couple of things about that. You can tackle this in two different ways. One of the things that I would say is first off, first step would be screen out the noise. Like stop consuming content uninterruptedly, and especially content that doesn't really help. A lot of wrong beliefs that guys have about dating, about women, are simply because honestly they just listen to a lot of shit. And they do that consistently, and they just jump on Reddit that notoriously is not the most reliable source of information. And they're just like going through these posts of hate and consuming all this content and TikToks and whatnot, and screening, like really being able to simply isolate yourself from the noise, especially in nowadays, is a huge component. Because it allows you, and this is gonna sound a little bit meta, so to speak, but it really allows you to find, ground yourself in reality. because social media is not reality. Things that you read about someone else is also not reality. Reality is what you experience through the actions that you take, and so, or at the very least, your reality, so to speak. So this is one point in terms of approximations. The next level would be do things, and instead of like watch things, you start by taking some form of action. And as I said, I get it, it's scary. At the very beginning, it can be as simple as putting yourself out there a little bit more. You don't need to go from 0 to 100 in one day. Just starting experimenting with social connections, social interactions, putting yourself out there a little bit more can really go a long, long way. Because that's the thing, the more you do stuff and the more you will also change your perception about things. You will start understanding what works and what doesn't work, and you will improve your communication skills. And this will also have a feedback loop, to use a nerdy term, on your mindset, which in other words means a lot of people assume that they are not the social guy. I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy who speaks to women. I'm not a guy who starts conversations. Here's the thing. You can become that person, but the way you become that person is not by telling yourself that you are that person, is by taking incremental action. And then once you get to the point where you consistently start conversations, then automatically your identity will adjust as a result. And so you can start by the actions, and this will in turn affect your mindset, so to speak. Starting the other way around is possible, but it's, in my experience, a little bit more complicated if you don't know how to do that. So everybody can take some form of action, some form of incremental action, as long as you move in small steps. And this is, for most people, I would say a great way to start.
Yeah, I found that when I was doing my own journey, and especially when it came to trying to raise my standards. I think a lot of people, that first step is taking action, but then as you go, it's about raising the standards of the quality of the action. But as I said, and you've addressed that really well, that first step is often just about getting out of here and just doing something in the real world. One of the things, I don't know if you agree with this, I found is stop consuming short-term content and start looking at long-form content. So a really good example would be, instead of looking at TikTok, look at YouTube videos. I'm not sure if you agree with that.
1000%. I've had the same experience, especially lately. I've really realized that, because I was focused on becoming a little bit more aware of my ideas, because in turns this obviously has an impact on my business, and this is something that I care a lot about. And so I was really asking myself, what gets me, let's say, how does this journey works in terms of going from being totally distracted and caught up in the noise to actually being very aware of reality and of your thoughts? Because when you're aware of your reality and your thoughts, I believe that good things happen, because you are in a place where you are, let's say, you can really see the world for what it is, and you can really become creative as well. So it really puts you in a very in a great mental place. And I totally agree with that. I believe that consuming short form content kind of gets you in this continuous chase of the next bit, and at some point you find yourself doing that more for entertaining reasons than for actually like educational reasons. And on top of that, it just gets you continuously distracted. So I do believe that consuming long form content is better. Obviously, yeah. Clearly depends on the long form content. If you just like put videos of a cat on a skateboard in replay, then it probably doesn't help. But we get what we mean by that. So I think it really makes a difference. The next step is also like being more intentional with the type of content that you consume. Kind of like, for example, if I want a bit of information, a piece of information, then I'm gonna be the one selecting that piece of information. Otherwise, my notifications aren't turned off. I don't get bombarded with stuff that I don't really care about. Because marketers are good, and I'm telling that also from the point of view of someone that is learning how to market himself, like in business terms. And it's like, I see people that do wonders there. They really can, like someone that sells, I don't know, products for pregnant women. If he's a good marketer, maybe would be able to like show me his piece of content, just because he has let's say a catchy title, let's say. So you gotta protect your attention, because at the end of the day, your focus is what dictates your actions. And Tony Robbins has this quote, where focus goes, energy flows, and I completely agree with that. And so protecting your focus is literally the first step.
I've definitely noticed that, and I've really tried to cut down. I mean, I use the Freedom app. I'm not sure if you have any application like that, and it stops me going onto certain applications at certain times. So it blocks me. Another thing I found really useful is instead of using my phone to be my alarm clock in the morning, I put this in my office, which is next door, and I actually have a physical alarm clock so that if you wake up in the night or if you're there at 1 o'clock in the morning, you're not scrolling through Instagram because your phone isn't there next to you. So I found that really helpful. And I think it's all about boundaries. It's all about thinking, don't, because there's always someone that has a plan for you, usually a marketer trying to sell you something. But nowadays we are bombarded with adverts and other people trying to, get us to buy stuff. We live in such a consumer culture that's where I think a lot of the distraction comes from. People are not able to put boundaries. And I suppose, you can talk about this. That's really applicable to dating because, when you're meeting someone for the new time, often sometimes people can try and invade those boundaries or people can take the mick. So have you found that with a lot of clients, like putting those boundaries up, is that a challenge you often see with clients?
Can you make an example, like which type of boundaries specifically you're referring to?
So I find like a very contentious point that everyone talks about on Instagram is whether a guy should pay for at the end of the date or not. Or another one would be, if a woman is, 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late, what do you do? Or if someone's asking for something that's a little bit unreasonable, I think guys a lot of the time struggle to know what's the difference between being nice and then just being walked all over.
Yeah, 1000%. I completely agree with that. Setting boundaries does not mean that you are being a jerk. This is something that I want to say. It just means that there are some things that you have decided that for your own self-love, self-protection, call it the way you want, you are not willing to tolerate. And you are just expressing to the world that in a polite way, in a respectful way, that you are not willing to compromise or to tolerate those things. And it's very important to do because, as you said, if you don't do that, you get walked all over, which, it makes sense because people realize the fact that they can do whatever they want and they can get away with that. And I'm not obviously encouraging, people walking all over you, but this is, sometimes what can happen. And so this is a crucial point. I'm also going to address the other point that you mentioned about being nice, because this is so much to unpack here. Like, a lot of guys get very frustrated with the fact that they are nice and still women don't like them. And so there are 2 points to be made. First of all, there is no written rule that says that being nice is the only requirement to spark attraction. There is no such a thing. It's not in the Bible. It's not in any kind of like religious, text that you can find. It's just not a thing. And so there are different things that, create attraction in women. And this is a totally separate conversation. Being nice is typically not exactly one of those. And so is it important? By all means, like no one wants to be with a jerk, but is it the only thing that you need to guarantee your success in dating? Probably not. Also, on top of that, most guys, they are not just nice because they are, this is like, it's not, it doesn't just come from a place of pure love and desire to improve the world and to, do good. It just comes from a place of insecurity. And it's more of a coping mechanism because being a little bit more provocative with your statements, putting out there parts of yourself that might get rejected or might expose you to potential risks inside the conversation is hard and is a risk because you are giving yourself you're giving the other person a chance to kind of disqualify you and to tell you, no, I don't like that. And so it's way easier to play it in a conservative way and to say, well, just let me be nice because if I'm nice, nothing can go wrong. The problem is, and it's not really a problem, it's one of the magic about dating, is that people are weirdly attracted to your weirdest unique points, so to speak. So you can be weird as much as you want as long as you put yourself out there, as long as you're not afraid to share that and embrace the parts of you that are not mainstream, that are not cool, let's say, generally speaking. And so if you're willing to do that, you have nothing to fear. So that's why you find people that you like. counterintuitively have a huge success when it comes to dating, and you're like, well, but this guy said things that like are crazy or like are outrageous or are like just nonsense. It's like, well, yeah, but the fact that he's willing to share those things automatically makes him stand out, because at the very least, if there is one thing that the girl can get out of that conversation, is that he doesn't depend on someone else's validation for that to share his opinion.
I've definitely noticed that when it comes to creating content, people can tell if you're being genuine or not. They're so good at being able to decipher, is this person really coming from a place of integrity? And it sounds like it's very similar to the dating advice you give. And on that note, just to sort of wrap up the ending of this has been a fascinating conversation. What is because I know at the moment, you're really expanding and using that integrity that you've learned in this skill set in your business. What is the plan for your consulting from here?
It's a good question. My plan is right now relatively straightforward, which is helping as many people as I humanly can. So this is the reason why I started, the content also on Instagram. This is the reason why I started this community for logical-minded men to get better at dating. This is, what I'm eager to do, which is helping those people that want better results when it comes to dating. I'm a big fan of, ambition. I think ambition is great in every aspect of someone's life. I'm an ambitious guy, and I am lucky enough to have clients that are also very, very ambitious. And I believe that if you're an ambitious guy, your relationships shouldn't be an exception. And I see too many guys compromising on this part of their lives, and it's just, I think it's not needed. So there's another way. And if it's just a matter of skills, as always. It's a skill set, is something that can be learned. So to come back to your point, my goal is to really help people improve the skill set and get to the type of relationships and that they want and that they feel they deserve.
And a really interesting point that I think we can both agree on is, if you do have something you want to improve on in your life, it seems like in every other aspect of life, people are very comfortable going to a mentor or doing a course or learning about it. But I get the impression that the only area that's not the case is with dating. People just go, oh, I should be able to just know this. No one gives you a manual if you're a guy. No one tells you how to improve this area of your life. Do you get that a lot when you're speaking to clients?
Yes and no. I would say I was getting that more in the past. I think people are getting more accustomed to the idea of getting help also in this area of their life, fortunately. And I think it's probably just a consequence of, social media or more exposure in general to people like me, let's say. But I do believe that you are 100% spot on that. It's definitely something that, a lot of men feel ashamed of. And there's 2 points there. Number one, as you said, it's it's a skill set, and it's something that we are never taught. And most of our when we want to learn something, typically we go through a certain journey where we have mentors that can help us with that. It applies to, if you want to learn, engineering, for example, you go to university, you study, you have your bachelor, you have your master, and that stuff. If you want to go to the gym, typically you're going to either have a personal coach or at the very least someone who helps you out and introduces you to that environment. But people don't have really anyone typically helping them out with dating, and even just sometimes having someone that listens to you can go a long way. And what typically people do is they rely on the people in their vicinity to get dating advice, and there are some things that don't make this strategy, in my opinion, at least this is my experience, very effective. And one of them is that your friends typically don't want to hurt your feelings, and so they're not gonna tell you, at least in most cases, what they think. And even assuming that your friends are brutally honest with you and they really want the best for you, if they are not where you want to be, in the position where you want to be when it comes to dating, the advice that they might give you is not really relevant. And I know I'm going to trigger some people here, but it's just the truth. You wouldn't learn, fitness from a guy who's clearly 200 pounds overweight, because it would make no sense. So dating is unfortunately this domain where you hear things all the time, and everybody is someone that is a lot of knowledge of, but at the end of the day you have to see what works. And you have different ways to see what works. You can go trial and error, so you can put yourself out there and try to experiment, and see what works and what doesn't work. That's one way to go about that. Or you can obviously find help either in the literature or in someone that can help you out along the way. And it's really up to you to decide, how much time you want to spend on this and, what's your approach. But ultimately, at the very least, try to not follow advice from people that are not reliable sources of information in that sense.
I think that's a really good point. Well, yeah, I mean, is there anything else you really wanted to talk about before we wrap up and we say all of your social media channels? What's on your mind at the moment?
There's just one thing that I would say that, every guy would, dating is this area where every guy probably would like to improve or to be better at to some extent, or at least, many guys, but there's always something that gets in the way. And I think that a lot of people tell themselves things that, they have these beliefs like they don't have enough time for dating. And if you are the viewer, you out there, I'm gonna challenge you right now, which is ask yourself the question, if my ideal woman came to my door, knocked on my door and asked me out, would I send her away telling her that I don't have time? And you probably wouldn't. And so typically a lot of people tell themselves these things because in reality it's not that they don't have time, is that they just don't want to get themselves through the dating process, which I get it, can be painful, frustrating, can expose you to rejections, can force you to work on parts of yourself that you don't really want to face. But at the end of the day, what's the other option? So yeah, just my 2 cents.
And I find that, it's really similar to when you're trying to put yourself out there through social media. You invariably get bad reactions, or it's very polarizing, or your friends say, why the hell are you doing this? It's just a challenge that you have to take to the next level. So sounds like dating is very similar in that sense. Well, look, Marco, it's been a fascinating discussion. Where can everyone find you?
My Instagram is dating with Marco, which is dating.with.marco. And as you were saying, I've recently launched this school community, which is called Dating for Logical Men. And you can find it on the school platform, or you can also directly access it from my Instagram.
Well, Marco, thank you very much for your time. And I'm sure we'll speak soon.
Thanks for having me, man. Speak soon.
Bye-bye. Bye.